There's something pretty awesome about the return of a beloved franchise. A sense of warmth and nostalgia mixed with cautious optimism. For many, Donkey Kong Country Returns was just that. A reimagining of a classic series, it brought one of Nintendo's most iconic characters back to the spotlight. But, as is often the case with beloved properties, its revival wasn't universally praised. Some felt the game hit all of the right notes, while others, not so much. I wanted to dive headfirst into this game and talk about why this game is celebrated by so many, and why for others, it didn't quite capture the magic they were hoping for. Let's start with the love, because honestly, there is a lot to love about this game. When the game was first announced, it felt like a homecoming. The Donkey Kong Country series on the Super Nintendo was not just another platformer. Rare's use of pre-rendered 3D graphics pushed the boundaries of what games could look like in the 90s. The music, everything about the games just worked. Fast forward to 2010, and the franchise had been dormant for well over a decade. Retro Studios, the team that had already proven themselves with Metroid Prime, was handed the reins. The result? A game that felt very familiar, yet fresh, respectful of its roots, and unafraid to chart new territory. One of the first things that hits you when you boot up Returns is how alive it feels. The art direction takes the lush jungles, precarious cliffs, and spooky caves of the originals and injects them with vibrant energy. The levels are not just static backdrops, they breathe, they move, the leaves flutter, the platforms crumble beneath your feet, and the enemies interact with the environment in ways that make the world feel dynamic. The silhouette levels deserve special mention here. These stages strip away the game's colorful palette, leaving only the outlines of characters and objects against richly hued backgrounds. It's bold, artistic, and a beautiful reminder that Retro Studios was not just remaking the original Donkey Kong Country. This was a sequel, and they were reinventing it. And then there's the gameplay. Retro Studios nailed that sense of momentum that defines a great Donkey Kong experience. Every roll, every jump, every swing feels deliberate and satisfying. The levels are designed with precision, challenging players to master their timing and their reflexes. But here's the thing. Donkey Kong Country Returns isn't just about reaching the end of a level. It's about doing it with style, with panache, with finesse. Collecting every Kong letter, finding all of the puzzle pieces, and conquering the fiendishly difficult time trials are badges of honor for players who crave a good challenge. The return of the minecart levels was another highlight, for better or worse. These high-speed, nerve-wracking stages are synonymous with Donkey Kong Country, and Returns pushes them to the absolute limit. One moment you're jumping over gaps, the next you're upside down on a loop-de-loop, all the while the track disintegrates beneath you. Thrilling? Absolutely. Frustrating? Well, we'll get to that. No discussion of Donkey Kong Country Returns is complete without talking about the music. The original trilogy set an impossibly high bar, thanks to David Wise and Evelyn Fisher's legendary compositions. And while Wise and Fisher are absent this time around, the team at Retro Studios, led by Kenji Yamamoto, managed to strike a delicate balance between honoring the classics and introducing new themes. Hearing remixes of tracks like Sticker Bush Symphony and Fear Factory is like meeting an old friend who's changed just enough to keep things interesting. The music isn't just background noise. It is a crucial part of the experience here, pulling you deeper into the game's world. So if Donkey Kong Country Returns has all of this going for it, why isn't it universally adored? Let's get into those reasons because they are well worth exploring as well. For many players, myself included, the biggest sticking point was the controls. The Wii's motion controls were a hallmark of the system, obviously, but they were not universally loved, especially in a game that is as precise as Donkey Kong Country Returns. To roll, a move that you have to use constantly, you had to shake the Wii remote. This might not sound like a big deal, but in practice, it added a very large layer of imprecision to a game that demands perfection. Imagine losing a life because your shake didn't register properly during a crucial jump. It's infuriating, especially when the original Super Nintendo games had such tight, responsive controls. I understand for games like Wii Sports, you obviously need to move around for games like that, but the very least they could have done was make the motion controls optional. Don't force me to use them. Let the player choose. And then there's the difficulty. Donkey Kong Country Returns is hard. Like, really hard. For a lot of players, this was a welcome challenge, a throwback to the, quote, get good era of gaming. But for others, it felt punishing, especially in later levels where the margin of error became razor thin. And while difficulty is obviously subjective, there is a very fine line between challenging and unfair. And some players felt that Returns occasionally crossed that line, with levels that demanded near perfect precision and timing. But perhaps the most significant hurdle that Returns faced was the very large and inescapable shadow of its predecessors. The original trilogy of games is not just beloved, it's almost sacred. For many fans, Donkey Kong Country is more than a game. It's a formative memory, a core memory, a touchstone of childhood. This meant that Returns was always going to be compared to its predecessors, often unfavorably. The sheer absence of underwater levels, for example, was a very sore spot for longtime fans, because, love them or hate them, those serene swimming stages were a defining part of that original trilogy, and without them, Returns felt sorely incomplete to some players. So, where does that leave Donkey Kong Country Returns? It's a game that dared to take a beloved formula and push it forward. For many, it passed with flying colors and succeeded spectacularly. It revived a dormant franchise, introduced new players to the joys of Donkey Kong, and proved that Retro Studios was one of the most talented and innovative developers working in the industry today. But it's also a game that isn't afraid to challenge its audience, sometimes to a major fault. Whether it is the egregious motion controls, the punishing difficulty, or the absence of certain series staples, Returns is not afraid to ruffle a few feathers. And while I myself really do enjoy Donkey Kong Country Returns, I do find myself alternating between Donkey Kong Country 3 and Returns for my least favorite Donkey Kong Country game. Not because I think they're bad. I think all of these games range from good all the way up to masterpiece, with the first one and Tropical Freeze, and honestly even the second one. I think they're all great. I think they are all very special in their own right, as you've seen in my previous videos leading up to this one. But in the end, Donkey Kong Country Returns, to me, was just very flawed. I really hope that the upcoming Donkey Kong Country Returns HD for the Nintendo Switch, which now releases next month, it's now December, I'm really thinking that the game is going to move up a lot in my placement. The motion controls was by far my biggest problem with the game, and that problem has been fixed. I know as of recently, there have been a lot of videos, a lot of controversy, people on Twitter not being very happy because some of the graphical elements of the game don't look that great. But if I'm being honest, I'm just very happy to have this game in HD on current hardware and add it to my Switch library. I'm ecstatic for that game to come out, and I will admit, it probably is a cash grab. But at the end of the day, having every Donkey Kong Country game on the Switch is very, very special and worth it to me. And I think it's well worth mentioning that Returns was eventually ported to the Nintendo 3DS, which is actually my preferred method of playing the game. Yes, the graphics are not nearly as pretty, though neither game was HD, so the differences were not super big, but it did look quite a bit worse on the 3DS. But it also had bonus levels, and there were no motion controls, so you could map, roll, and smash to a button, and that fixed my biggest problem with the game, therefore making the 3DS version my preferred way to play. Again, both versions of the game are very flawed, hence why I'm so excited for HD. In the end, whether you love it, whether you hate it, objectively, Donkey Kong Country Returns is a statement. A bold, beautiful, and occasionally very frustrating reminder of what makes this franchise so special. It's not perfect, nowhere near perfect, but maybe that's the point? Like the jungle itself, almost. It's wild, it's untamed, it's full of surprises, and isn't that what made Donkey Kong so special in the first place? I wanted to dedicate the end of this video and this video in general to all of the people that have made this little YouTube dream come true. I am currently in the process of being approved for finally being monetized. My subscriber count has skyrocketed. These Donkey Kong Country videos, of all games that this could have happened with, the videos are blowing up, at least for me, by my standards, and the views and the comments, the stories that you guys have been leaving me has been so great, and I'm so incredibly thankful for each and every one of you that thought that my channel was worth subscribing to. There are awesome things coming very soon. I'm not going to speak on any of them specifically, but I do want you guys to get excited. We're going to form the best damn Nintendo community on the internet. I appreciate you all so much. I hope you guys have a great day. Let me know what you think of Donkey Kong Country Returns below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great one, and take care of each other.